Continuing education knows that at the end, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we take the time to really listen to their needs and we understand all the different options that are available across the campus for them.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
Everybody, good morning. Great to have you. I'm Carl Quintanilla of CNBC and NBC News. For recording purposes today, it's Wednesday, April 10th. It's 10:30 in the morning. This is panel 17970 titled, What's Next for College Athletics? Before we get started, just some boilerplate. The University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges it's located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the university can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We'll do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty in their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student access, and integrating indigenous knowledge, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support, and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. As for Q&A, everybody's going to get a chance to ask some questions. We're going to reserve that for the end, but we're going to save a lot of time for it. We'll use a note card system. Chuck and Bianca, I think, will have these. Raise your hand. They'll get you a card. They'll race them to the desk. Make sure it's legible, I guess, and to the point. And if it's directed at a specific speaker, just let us know. As for our panelists, this is a powerhouse panel. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Tad Boyle, men's basketball. Kendall Wetta, women's basketball. Jim Martin, former regent and professor, expert in sports law, and of course, AD Rick George. Rick, I thought we could begin. I know we're going to cover NIL in some depth, but what a month, what a series of months it's been in college sports and women's college sports. I just wonder, talk about the temperature right now. It's been incredible to watch.
Yeah, it's been great. I've always felt like if the women's basketball got the platform nationally and having more games on national TV, that their viewership would grow. And I mean, if you look at 19 million for the women's championship game, I mean, they've arrived in a big way. I'm proud of our two basketball teams making a deep run into the tournament with the women going to the Sweet 16. Coach Boyle team got to the round of 32 and really played great at the end of the season. I mean, our basketball is only going to get better, but we go into a tough league next year in the Big 12, and we'll be ready for that. And with that, as soon as the season's over, then it's like, okay, you got all these student athletes going in the transfer portal. The day a team lost, the next day there were players in the transfer portal, and maybe Coach Boyle can talk about that at some point, but our industry has got a lot of challenges, with NIL, with the transfer portal, and you can't talk about one without the other. And but what a great year for basketball in general. Even the men had a $16 million 16 million homes. Women, 19 million. I mean, just spectacular. And I know when we played in Albany, I think it was 8.7 million that viewed our product and our basketball teams and men's basketball. And that exposure for this community and the university is really important and really helpful. So proud of our teams and really proud of where basketball is going and how important it is on the world stage.
Coach, I'll give you a minute. Talk about your experience the last few weeks, and in the business world, we've been covering the sports rights story pretty religiously. I mean, when ESPN sets records, pro or college, for aired games, we're in a moment, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. There's no doubt. I mean, college basketball's it's been around for a long time. The NCAA tournament, I think, gets more viewership over a 3-week period than any sporting event out there, maybe other than some World Cup soccer. But what the women's game did this year, the explosion there, I think, has really created a lot of excitement. Certainly at networks, at the network level, which is where our games are aired, but. It is definitely a different day and age for our student athletes, for our coaches, for our administrators, for the NCAA, and I'm not sure I have a lot of solutions, but we can talk about a few today.
We're going to try. Kendall, I wonder, I saw this headline in the Hollywood Reporter this week. It said, "Women's sports rights boom may have finally arrived." Does it feel that way?
Yeah, I would say it absolutely does feel that way. You're playing in these big arenas and these big stages all across the nation when you're in the March Madness tournaments, and you really can just feel the amount of support that the women's game is gaining. Even from my freshman year, there's so much more recognition around it and coverage, and it just is very cool to see that, even in a 3-year span.
Yeah, Carl, just to follow up on that. I just saw Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, come out yesterday and say there will definitely be units for women's basketball starting next year. And so for those of you that don't know, in men's basketball, there's a dollar amount tied to a unit, and a unit is when you get into the tournament, and then when you advance, you get additional units. The women have not had that, but in this new TV agreement, they're going to get basketball ad units that'll come back to the conference, and they're split evenly, and women's basketball will share in that next year, which will help our budget, and it will help elevate that game even more. So it's a big moment for women's basketball.
Jim, your thoughts on just this before we wrap up, sort of the broad discussion of the phenomenon that is college sports. Is this sort of how those who watch the legal structure of the leagues have been thinking for a while that this moment would come?
Well, let me just say, welcome everybody here. And I don't know, are there very many students out there? Okay, great. I love to see students participate in these events, and I'm going to challenge you later on to go to law school, whether you practice law or not. My first thing, it's a brave new world of athletics. And it's a wild, wild west, too. I told, I think, AD Rick George, I'd rather be coaching in the NFL right now than I would be on a college campus. And hopefully that'll come through of why I think that. And then I hope we end with where do I think we're going? Because it's all by the courts. We've had failed leadership, and maybe those are some of the things. The courts have had to step in because no one's acted.
So a couple of years ago, we did a panel specifically about NIL with AD George, and back then it was still pretty new, and it felt like we were kind of groping in the dark in terms of policy and guidelines and where things would be going on a state, federal level. Can you just talk about whatever progress has been made in 2 years?
Well, we're trying to figure that out as we go along, because a couple of years ago when we did this panel, we were in process of putting in parameters around what NIL would look like. And I served on that committee, and I serve on another one now that's trying to fix it if you can. And we had some really good things in place. And NIL was intended to be a business to student athlete relationship where a business would hire a Kendall Witter to be the spokesperson, and she would do commercials and she would do appearances and things like that. That's NIL. We're not talking NIL when we're talking about collectives and where this has gone. It's under that umbrella, but it's totally different. And when we lost the NCAA got reversed on an opinion and lost the Alston case, which allowed us to provide $5,980 for each of our student athletes for educational benefits. When that got overturned, the NCAA said, okay, we don't want another lawsuit. So if there's a state law, go by the state law. If there's not a state law, and all the state laws are different, so it allowed different institutions to do different things in their market and in their state. And so they could do that, or if you didn't have rules, just make it up, but you can't violate the rules of inducements and tampering. And we all know what those are. It's alluring somebody to your institution, tampering with a player that's on another team. So that happened, and then collectives arrived, and we were probably behind a little bit in that. And you saw a number of people transfer from football a few years back because NIL, the way it was intended to be, was not where it was going, and we didn't jump on the train as early as we could, and I'll take responsibility for that. But now we're kind of all in, and you've got to have a collective. And so where it's evolved is you have these collectives that money's going in. Some are 501c3s, some of them are LLCs, and they're providing resources for student athletes. There has to be a quid pro quo, but there's no fair market value. So somebody could hire Kendall for $1 million to say, to produce one tweet. I mean, that's just a simple one to talk about, but it's nuanced because you don't know what the value is. And so, and Tad can probably speak about this more than I can, but you don't know what a student athlete's being offered. And so where it's evolved now is you got a transfer portal where there's a temporary restraining order by a few attorney generals around the country that says you can transfer unlimited amount of times. And so a student athlete can go into the portal, and once that student athlete goes into the portal, they're in there. The institution that they're leaving has an obligation to provide their scholarship the rest of that semester, but after that semester, they're on their own. And we're seeing in football that a number of these student athletes never get out of the portal. And we're seeing in men's basketball, the numbers are very similar in women's basketball. There's 2,000 student athletes in the portal today. So they're going into the portal. So where does education fit into that? Where does graduation fit into that? And those are things that have been really important to the NCAA and to us and to those member institutions. And so where does that go? So it's evolved. And now it's at a point where, you know, you've got donor fatigue and, you know, do I support a collective or do I support the athletic department? I mean, we could talk about this subject for hours and I could go on, but I won't.
Coach, this is really relevant to the cadence of your business, like right now.
Yes.
Can you just talk about what you're going through?
Oh, boy. First of all, don't anybody feel sorry for me. I mean, it goes with the territory, but our job has changed 180 degrees from where it was 2 or 3 years ago, and even 12 months ago, you know, where we were. So, and I think I want to just reiterate what Rick said, because I think it's really important that we, you know, understand the difference between what NIL truly was meant to be and what we have today with these collectives. It's pay for play, and let's not make any bones about it. That's what it is. They're using money to lure kids away from schools to their schools, and I feel like I'm playing poker every day. You know, I don't know your job, but my guess is, you know, in the financial world, the old adage, you follow the money. Well, when you follow the money and the money is now going to the student athletes, what you get is you get the underbelly of our society that preys upon these kids and will go around and sign them up with the idea that if you sign with me, I'll be your agent and we'll get you in the portal at the end of the season, and we'll get your value jacked up because we will pit Colorado against Cal and Cal against Duke, and, you know, name the schools, right? And so as coaches, you know, you find yourself in bidding wars that you didn't ever want to be in, and you got to be really, really careful with that because there are still NCAA rules, but yet they're not being enforced. And so if you sit on the sidelines, you know, and put your head in the sand, you're gonna fall behind really quickly. So finding that balance, finding, you know, the relationships you have with your current players. Again, everybody's got a number where they're going to leave, and then kids start talking, and, oh, Carl, you're getting this, and Jim, you're getting that, and, you know, I'm getting this. Why are you getting more than me? Like, you know, comparison, you know, is the thief of joy, and it's taken the joy out of our players, and it's taken the joy out of our coaches. I'm not going to quit doing what we do in terms of recruiting great kids from great families and trying to help educate them along the way. But we're gonna miss on some guys. We're gonna lose some guys. But it's not about the guys that leave you. It's not about the guys you don't sign. It's about the guys that are in your program. And we're not going to change our values and our core beliefs about education and coming to a place like the University of Colorado and having a great experience. We're not going to change that. But our team may change out a little bit more year to year than what it has in the past, unfortunately. But this has all been kind of thrown upon us, and we're dealing with it as best we can. And Jim is exactly right. This is now in attorneys' hands, and I think any time when your organization is reaching out and begging the federal government for help, you know you're in trouble. And that's where we are.
Jim, your thoughts on that, and what fixes are beginning to make sense?
Well, there's maybe at the end here we'll see, I have some ideas. I had ideas when I sat on the Board of Regents and I was chair of the Intercollegiate Athletic Committee. Well, I argued for years that students ought to be paid some stipend. Now, this was in the 90s. A lot of athletes really didn't have spending money. Now, let's fast forward to how draconian the NCAA was. In 2014, 2 Oklahoma basketball players were sanctioned for getting a $3.38 hot dog at a graduation type event. Now, that could have made them lose their amateur status. And in fact, they had to repay that, and that was the way then they got around them receiving money. Who remembers Jeremy Bloom? All-American, 2 years. I can still remember his 94-yard touchdown run, as though it happened yesterday. He was an Olympic skier. He lost his amateur status because he needed money to train for the Olympics. He got paid by a sponsor and therefore lost his amateur status. So that set the groundwork for all of this stuff. And then college, I want to say college presidents, because it's college presidents that give the authority to the NCAA. And when you get into a multi-billion-dollar business, I'm not sure that college presidents understand the dynamics. When I served, Coach McCartney made a little over $300,000. It was more of a, it wasn't a intramural sport. I mean, we had a lot of players, but we didn't have the TV money. So think TV money, because TV money is what's driving all of this. And that goes way back to the NCAA of Oklahoma versus the NCAA. And the NCAA said, Oklahoma, you can't negotiate your own TV rights. It had to come through the NCAA or they would sanction them. So the Supreme Court, again, these are going to the Supreme Court, these decisions. And like Tad said, this ought to come from Congress, but Congress probably can't, decide on which bag is wet, in any one, session. They've done nothing this session, but don't get me going on that. Because we need leadership, and it's got to be fair. It's got to be fair to the universities, and it's got to be fair to the players. Now, I think we know if it's pay for play, the NCAA's definition of amateurism is done, okay? Don't think of them as amateurs. Remember when the amateurs used to play in the Olympics in basketball? Now it's all the NBA players. I have no interest. I never watched that. How about the 1980 Olympic hockey team when we beat the Finns and then the Russian and then the Finns to get the gold medal? That changed the course of everything. I think that as we move forward in this, there's got to be leadership, and the NCAA, this comes into what I think should happen, is that the Power Four conferences now ought to go their own way. We need a super league, but let me save that comment maybe during questions, because something has to be done. Because this thing it's going to melt down. It's going to melt down. And to be able to hire a kid away from a university that has the transfer portal, ability now. It used to be you had to sit out a year. Those collectives are giving certain players money in order to entice them to come to the university. Now, no one probably, that's kind of whispering. No one wants to admit the realities of this, but it is. It's pay for play. Now, as Tad knows, you can put a basketball team together with a couple players, and each, a point guard is worth $1 million, $1.5 million, and whatever. Now, God forbid okay, he needs $2 million. Okay. Rick's collective says it needs $8 million. Yeah, I know. So that's right, and you're totally right, Rick. I mean, it's the collectives. It's not that the athletes shouldn't get the money, but I'm going to talk about a case at the end that's going to change all of this dynamic if it goes into the Supreme Court again.
All right, I promise to get to that. Kendall, I have so many questions for you. One is how you thought about comp when you were a kid, hoping that one day you'd play college athletics. And now that you're in it, what does comp look like, feel like for you, for your friends? How much of your day is spent thinking about it versus practicing and studying? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I would say growing up, you never really know what it's like to be compensated in college. You don't really have an idea of what that is. But my freshman year, I got a little bit of a taste of like pre-NIL, and then once NIL was established, so I've kind of experienced both. We do have a monthly stipend that we get, but with the addition of NIL, as a student athlete, and I think speaking for a lot of student athletes, it's been really nice to be able to market myself in and around the community and try and create value around that and really maximize my platform as a student athlete while I'm here, because this is really a cool opportunity you have for these 4 years to just make the most out of being a college athlete. And you only get 4 years. And so I would say I've done a good job of marketing myself in the community, like reaching out to businesses that I'm interested in working with and providing value to them in exchange something that I want out of them. So not only just getting paid, yes, there are deals that you get where you do get money, but also getting services, getting to be able to network with people in the community, build relationships, build connections. And that's not the case for all student athletes. I will say that I think as a female student athlete, I do have to work a little bit harder to reach out and make those connections compared to my male peers. But it is just a cool opportunity, and it is what you make of it, truly. So yeah, I would say it's been a really good experience for me, and I don't know a whole lot about what this new collective is going to be, but so far I've enjoyed NIL. I have plans of attending medical school after college, and so being able to save up as much money as I can while I am, in my 4 years here to be able to help pay for that after that is going to be fantastic, but that's just kind of been a little bit of my experience.
Does it all come down to social media? Would you say that's the most important factor in determining one's comp?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, it's not all driven by social media. So when you're talking about social media, a lot of companies want you to promote their company on social media, so that's the exchange that you're getting in return for the good or service. And so that will look like a post on your Instagram feed or a story or a reel or whatever that might be. And so I would say a large amount of what businesses are wanting comes through social media, but it could also look like appearances. Like I did something in the fall for the Denver Broncos. I was on a panel for International Day of the Girl, and they paid me to come do the panel. And it was just a really cool opportunity that I probably would have done even if I wasn't getting paid, but that just was an extra bonus where I got to go and kind of engage with members of the community and just be doing something that you wouldn't normally get to do if NIL wasn't around.
I told Kendall before, I volunteered to be her agent because you need an agent in these days in order to traverse this unknown territory. And so, an athlete can't go out and sell themselves. That's what the collector is supposed to do, but you need someone as a third party making sure you have the biggest piece of the pie you can get.
You're heavily involved, Rick, in recommendations that are kind of being formulated, standardized contracts and registrations for agents and things like that. How real are those are those possibilities?
Well, look, I think they're real. And one thing I want to say about Kendall, this is our student athlete. I mean, this is what we're proud of. I mean, her doing the things the right way and the education, the medical school, that's our student athletes, and really proud of what she's done. And she has had to work hard for this. But that's what NIL was intended to be, is exactly what she's doing. She is representing companies and she's serving on panels and she's getting paid. That's NIL. And so, really proud of what she's done, and a number of our student athletes that are aggressively going out there and trying to monetize their name, image, and likeness, and they should have that ability to do that. But what we're talking about is not the same. Tad talks about pay for play, and there has to be some kind of parameters around that, because it's not sustainable over time. And our industry's got a lot of challenges. There's a number of lawsuits that are against the Power Five and the NCAA, and there's just a lot of things going on. And you talk about realignment, you talk about the transfer portal and the number of student athletes. I mean, the model of we talk about amateurism. The model of that for the NCAA over time has been really good for student athletes. I mean, I'm sitting here today because I was an athlete that got a scholarship, or I wouldn't have gone to the University of Illinois. There's a number of student athletes like that need this education, because we're talking about 4 years makes the next 40. And if you're transferring from program to program, are you going to be able to get that degree at the end of the day? And so, I mean, we're in flux in our industry, and we've got to figure out how we can put that back in. And I know Jim talked about, the getting a NCAA violation for $300 worth of food. We've evolved, and I think that message and that narrative has been lost. We now provide unlimited meals. We feed our student athletes 3 meals a day. They get a gold card that allows them to go to restaurants 4 nights a week in Boulder, that they can swipe their card. We've got psychological health performance. We pay for full cost of attendance in addition to their stipend. We don't take money out of their stipend for meals. The value of that, I mean, we've got an incredible psychological health performance department that provides a mental support for them when they need it. Education, scholarship, academic support. I mean, we value that at about $140,000, and I think that's lost in all of this. I think we do a really good job of preparing them for the next 40 years, and that's our goal. But when you've got transfers that come in and out each year, I mean, do they have those same opportunities? And we'll see that probably 5 to 10 years from now. I think there's progress that needs to be made. We're still working on the things, Carl, that you talked about. The student athlete protections has been really one about disclosures and, making sure that agents aren't exploiting student athletes and taking a larger percentage than they should be taken, because we're seeing that happen. At some point, we've got to at least put our arms around this, but, you can see where some of this is going. They're talking, Jim mentioned about the power conference of the Power Four maybe splitting off, and is that the right thing to do? But you're only talking about 2 or 3, maybe 4 sports that generate additional revenue for the athletic department. Football is 70% of that. Men's basketball is the next in line, and then women's basketball. So what happens to all the other sports? And that has to be part of this discussion. If I'm the USOC, I'm out there talking about, this is my feeder system. 84% of the student athletes that we get to compete in the Olympics are going to one of your institutions. And if we're not providing that same amount of support, because money only goes so far, and I think Tad said it earlier, follow the money. These are challenges in our business and in our industry that we have to get our arms around to make sure that we're providing meaningful opportunities for young men and women that come into our program. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that was really good, actually. And we're getting a lot of questions, so thank you. Keep them coming. One is for you, Rick. Across the entire D1 ecosystem, all sports, what percentage of athletes do we think are benefiting financially?
Oh gosh, I think you're going to see more women's basketball players being represented because of the value now that you talked about social media, and it's about number of followers and the impact that you can have on doing that. I think football probably is a large majority of those that are getting, but not all of them. Men's basketball is probably next, and then women. There's only so many opportunities, but those three sports are garnering the most. And I would say that, gosh, I don't know, Ted, maybe 50% of your team gets, real NIL deals or.
Yeah, I don't know the real. I know. I don't know. That's between them and the businesses, right? I don't get involved in that. That's supposed to be, what they create for themselves. So, yeah, but
it's not a large percentage of student athletes. And I think if you look at, we have 17 sports, and I just mentioned 3 of them. The 14 sports are probably not getting as much. And most of them aren't getting anything at all. So that's just a reality.
And I think, at this level, our 100% of our players are getting, financial support, but you go, an hour, 15 minutes northeast of here at University of Northern Colorado, where I started my career, and maybe 2 or 3 of their players are benefiting. The rest they're just getting their scholarship and their stipend, just like the old days. So the lower level schools, and there's a lot of them out there, the majority of basketball players aren't, and I'm sure women's basketball players aren't, and track athletes aren't. So you're really talking about the Power 5 and the bigger, funded schools.
I'd like to apply that too, just with one particular sport. You have the quarterback of the football team worth $4.7 million. The center may not have 1 penny in NIL money. So, I don't know how much athletes are sharing what they're getting here, but it's basically inequitable in a college environment. And so, one of my things I've always been under, in terms of words have meanings. And we use this word student athlete, I think, too loosely. In this transfer portal, I wonder how many kids are transferring because they want to have a better political science department or a bigger, better engineering department. Now, there are some, maybe with that, but that's kind of the things that make this whole thing the Wild West. And so the sooner we realize that, and Congress is enacting, the NCAA is enacting, we need more lawyers in order to figure this mess out.
Says the lawyer.
I mean, I swear, you could have to stay on top of this issue weekly, if not monthly. And so, it's a great time to be around if you're receiving money. It's a great environment to be in college athletics. I might say, the NBA has, or let's say NFL has its own, it doesn't have a farm system. The Major League Baseball has a farm system, as we know. And so hockey has a farm system. So the NFL is using colleges as their farm system. So those are the kind of things that we're at the table negotiating, I want to bring up.
This is a good one, Kendall, from Katie. How are we supporting our student athletes' social, emotional, and spiritual health in this rapidly changing environment? How can your mental health community support these young people better? I don't know if you have thoughts on that, because you don't sound like you're upset at any of this.
Yeah, and I mean, Rick kind of mentioned some of the resources that we have that help us with mental health. But no, I wouldn't say I'm upset. Like I said, I do think it's just a great opportunity in the era that we're in right now. And I've been putting in a lot of effort, and so I've been getting a lot of return on that. But yeah, we do have PHP, which is a place where you can go. I would say, at least for me, speaking on my behalf, the NIL isn't what causes mental health issues or anything like that. I haven't had struggles with that or concerns or anything along those lines. It's just an extra thing that I can do when I have time to maximize my value, point blank. The PHP is more so if you're dealing with other things, or maybe you're frustrated with basketball or home life or whatever it may be. And so we do have resources like that we can always go to. We had one of our PHP ladies travel with us throughout the NCAA tournament and is just there to listen and kind of help in any way, shape, or form that we may need. So we always have those resources available to us.
Is there a sense, Coach, that it is a bigger issue for administrations than the players themselves? Right?
In terms of mental health.
In terms of sorting all of this out.
Oh,
I mean, maybe the players are getting by just fine, and it's raining money. And
no, the players are fine. I worry about them down the road. I worry about the fact that some of these young men, and maybe, again, I coach men's basketball, so I don't have a feel for any other sport. I don't know what's going on in football or women's basketball, but I just know in our sport, there is a majority, I shouldn't say majority, there's many, many kids that might have their highest earning years of their life while they're 20 and 21 years old, and that sets them up for mental health problems down the road in their mid-20s or in terms of their self-worth, and because it is such a chaotic environment now, and they're hitting it at the sweet spot, and good for them. I've always felt like student athletes should get a stipend over and above, and maybe if the NCAA had done something, we wouldn't be here, but I don't know about that either because the antitrust laws. So I just worry about these kids down the road, and Rick and our donors have done a great job putting that PHP department together so they have access to counseling and to someone to talk to outside the coaching staff that they can go to help them with that, and that's a great thing. But when they leave here, are they going to have that? And many of them will not, and so I see the problems are going to be coming 5, 10, 15 years down the road, not right now. Right now, they're fat and happy.
Totally agree, Tad. One thing to keep in mind, I think, is the number of dollars that flow into the university through the athletic department to support men's and women's basketball, and these are TV rights, again. So what's happened is the disparity between what goes to coaches and staff and facilities versus what has gone to the student or to the athlete. And that has gotten bigger. In fact, University of Michigan 2022 won the national championship. Jim Harbaugh has been railing. He's now transferred to another school, but that particularly student football players need to all be paid something. But that disparity is an example. 2022, the coaches and their staff brought in, or it cost about $75 million, and meal and aid to the student athlete and their benefits was about $33,000. So you can see right there. I mean, people come to the games not to see the regents. They may see Rick on the field, but they come to see the student athlete. And, one of the reasons, too, I don't watch, and not a baseball fan most of the time, you never know who's going to be there from one year to the next. And, you need that continuity.
Thoughts on that, Rick?
Look, there was a time that, if you don't have great facilities, you're not going to attract people here. We've got this incredible backdrop, the best backdrop in America, in my opinion, for a college, a university. There's nothing like it. But there was a time where we had to build a facility, and that facility has really enhanced our ability to provide the resources that we provide for student athletes. So I think Jim's right. A few years ago, they weren't. But when you value a scholarship at $140,000, that's a lot. That's more than most people are making in their jobs, and we're providing that. Should the student athletes be able to monetize their name, image, and likeness? 100%. But if and again, there's a number of institutions that are paying coaches way too much. And I agree with that. And there's, when they were building facilities, somebody built a putt-putt golf course. That's just like saying we got all this money. No, it was Clemson. We did some things that, and some of this is our fault, as administrators, that we didn't say no to a lot of this. If you think about the NIL, where the NIL was when we were moving in the right direction, it was about Kendall Wetta, and it's about her working to get monetize her name, image, and likeness, and she's done a great job with that. But then it got to, okay, well, we're going to put this collective together so we have all this money to recruit a great class, or to, to be able to compensate our student athletes to get them at a higher level. And then once the one collective, then there were multiple collectives. And as I said earlier, we were behind the eight ball on that, because we hadn't evolved to that, because I was still focused on what is real NIL. We created an exchange and we did all these different things. And then we were like, okay, well, if we don't do this, then we're going to get left in the dust. And, like I said, a few years back, we had 20-some football players that transferred out because they wanted to get NIL opportunities. And so, yeah, I agree with some of that. I mean, we are paying some coaches too much. But again, the model of the NCAA has worked historically for almost 100 years. And now we're got all these different entities that are they're having a say in our industries. And you talk about lawyers, and you talk about these union leaders, and they're all making money. And it's costing us a lot of money for hiring outside attorneys and things like that to be able to navigate through some of these lawsuits that are there. So look, the people that are challenging our industry are out there because they can make money on our industry. That's a fact. And not a lot of people talk about that. But we're doing a lot of amazing things for our student athletes. I'm proud of what we've done here, and we're going to continue to make sure that we set our student athletes, whether they're here 1 or 4 years, for the next 40 years, and that's our responsibility.
On that point, good question. I don't know enough about this. You still got me? No? Mic check? No?
We can
Still
share.
good? Jim, the question is, what is the relationship between NIL and the collapse of the Pac-12, if any?
I'm not sure it has a lot to do with it, but it's certainly showing where and how the new leagues are now coming together. Again, it's money. And I agree with Rick. We have great facilities. You've got to play, but it's an arms war. One school builds a $45,000 facility, then that becomes the standard, and then the standard becomes higher in order to, compete, as they say, with the big boys. I'm not sure that is what the university mission was to begin with. And I have some ideas how, you never want to get rid of athletics. The fans would whatever, they'd revolt. So, that's a lot of times the only thing they relate to after they graduate. But, how do we break the arms race? How do we become equitable? I've got some ideas, and I don't know when I'm going to throw those out.
Why not now?
Okay, well, let me take the first one here. Dartmouth, there was a move a couple of years ago in Northwestern, and then it died a slow death. But that athletes are really employees of the university. And if you look at the National Labor Relations Act, they meet every one of the criteria for being able to vote as to whether they want a union or not. But first you have to be an employee. Judges have stated that in the case of the Dartmouth, the National Labor Relations, this is not the court, the regional director, that they are employees and they can have a class and they can move forward with the being designated as an employee. If you're an employee, you get to bargain for wages, hours, and working conditions. So if you're going to rearrange the leagues, should the players have a little bit of say? Just think, do we have West Virginia that our players are going to have to go play? The time zone changes. Even the conferences in Major League Baseball are there's travel times. We used to bus to in the Big 8. We were actually the outlier because Nebraska, Oklahoma, and whatever, they got the bus. And so now, you need a 2-day, away from studies. I don't know how you'd balance that. But so the Dartmouth model, and look at this closely because it could be the game changer. The real game changer, and if I was Rick and Tad, is a case that's going to be argued next January, and it's called House, House versus NCAA. They just got their class approved, and I'm not going to go through all the legalese, but they're asking, they're talking about back pay for athletes. Okay, back pay. Now, you know what that amount, you know what, how many dollars we're talking here? $4.2 billion being retroactive. Okay, now just think what that would do to athletic budgets and conferences and the way that NIL is affected. But it also is another important part, and it's saying that the schools, the conferences can do more to pay directly to the student so that it doesn't have to go through this 501c3 that no one knows who's supplying the money. Can you imagine these Texas schools and that oil money? Just got back from Dallas. I mean, my God, the houses and the way people, I mean, it's just, I went down there for the eclipse. I won't say what happened. I made my plane reservation half an hour too soon, so I missed the eclipse. So I forgot, and then I couldn't change. I couldn't get a rental car. Oh, jeez. I drove by this thing. I watched it with my glasses in the airplane. So, house.
Anyway, back to sports.
Yeah, back to sports.
Rick, I did see you writing something down. Did you have a thought?
I think there's some misinformation out there. Student athletes have always had a say in our governance structure, particularly in the Pac-12. Has anybody asked the student athletes, do they want to become employees? Because there's a lot of issues around being an employee. You're talking different labor laws in every state. You're talking in our state, you can basically fire somebody tomorrow without cause. So there's a lot of different things that go around the labor laws that somebody doesn't understand. But it's like this, Tennessee has come out and their AG got involved in one thing. A comment that I heard was, well, the institution didn't have any say. That's not true. There's a governance structure that the NCAA has that includes all institutions. They get an opportunity to vote on it. Student athletes are part of that process. Ask them, but it's all these other entities that are trying to figure out how they can play a part in this. And there are lawsuits. He mentions House. There's Carter. There's Fontenot. There's gosh, I can't remember, think of the other one, but there's 4 major cases against the Power 5 schools and the NCAA. That's a fact. But in our industry, there's a challenge there. I mean, you're exactly right. If we have to pay that kind of money, what does college athletics look like? That's what I think about every day. That's what my group is working on every day, on how do we navigate for a scenario that we don't know, because it's coming. How soon it comes, we don't know that, but we do know these cases are coming up. So there is a threat to our industry, right now that we have to navigate. But we got to get the right people at the table. The student athletes absolutely have to be at the table to have a voice in that. That's the structure that we've had in the NCAA, and it's worked historically. And again, all of these different things, these rules at the NCAA, Tad mentioned that enforcement isn't enforcing the rules. Well, because you have attorney generals that overturn it, and we get temporary restraining orders, and the NCAA can't govern the way they've governed in the past. So there has to be some kind of middle ground. Tad, you were going to say something?
To add to that, because I think the one thing in my experience in the 30 years I've been involved in Division I athletics is the system in which decisions are made. And there's a Division I council that ultimately makes the decisions. There's a lot of votes that go on with student athletes, coaches associations. We have 363 institutions in our coaches association. There got 5 of us, but we probably can't agree on everything. We have 300. You're not going to get agreement with that many. So it goes to the Division I council, and to me, the Division I council does not have a student athlete on it. Division I council does not have a coach on it. They've got presidents, conference commissioners, I think, or people from conferences. And I think, to me, if we're looking for solutions at the NCAA level, the Division I Council has to have more representation because they're the ones making the decision. And we've got a great chancellor here who's now retiring. We got a new one coming in. We got a great athletic director. We got a lot of, but at that level, they don't always know what the boots on the ground are going through. They don't know what the student athlete's going through, and they're not educated to make those decisions, in my opinion, without some input from the student athletes that may come up through the chain of the bureaucracy or may not. I feel like I have a voice, but I don't feel like my voice is heard at that level, and that's where the decisions are being made, and that's really a frustrating point for coaches, and it might even be a frustrating point for athletic directors and administrators.
Yes, it is. But I mean, one correction, though, Tad. There are student athletes on the Division I Council now, but there's only a couple of them on that council. So there's presidents, there's commissioners, there's faculty athletic reps. So it's a broad-based group, and every institution in the country has a student athlete advisory committee, and that's kind of where we percolate certain things that come up through the NCAA. Jill Keegan does a really good job with that. And I'd love to hear Kendall's thought on that too.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Kendall, because as an athlete and as a student, you've got all this legal wrangling. It's happening all above your head. Do you get the sense that athletes want to have a voice in policy, or are they just trying to be a better player and build their brand as best they can? And then whatever happens above you happens.
I think you would get a mix of student athletes that really don't care about policy and then some that really do. When I'm kind of sitting here listening to all of this, because I'm learning too with you guys, that's something that I would be super interested in, is being able to voice my experience and my opinions at a higher level, and have a say in different policies that are implemented, because I know that there is frustration from players with things that NCAA is doing, or whatever it might be, from March Madness tournaments to policies, whatever. And to be able to directly voice those opinions instead of just feeling like you have really nowhere to go with that would be, I think, huge.
Let me just add to that. I totally agree, Kendall. But it's the overall, I think, equity now with the amount of money that is in the pot here, and that's kind of what I'm looking at here. How much money flows in the pot and where does it go? You know, professional athletes made very little money up until they formed players' associations. And there they had this, here's what you can have meetings all day long. You can have advisory reports. It comes down to a contract. It's called the collective bargaining agreement, in which you be able to bargain that if you're in a non-revenue sport, in lacrosse, soccer, that they can't take away your scholarship after 1 year. You know, and you know, if you don't have some kind of protection, it's good cause, bad cause, no cause at all. I'll see you down the road, Charlie. And I just think, and employment law was my love when I was in law school, because we worry about our real estate and our money investments. Your job is, or in this case, the performance in an athletic endeavor is what these people have trained for and continue to train. And it brings out all the best in people because it requires discipline and passion and taking risks. And that's what we need to instill and still have the benefit of having, when that money comes in, it's equally shared.
Tad, you mentioned, you said you weren't going anywhere as a result of all this. But there is a sense that coaches across divisions.
Or school. I'm not going to go to another school. I didn't say I was not going to go anywhere.
Right. There's this sense that coaches have spent decades building formulas, right, for recruiting and retention and success. And when Nick Saban gets up there in front of Congress and goes, you know what, this had something to do with my retirement decision. Do you think that feeling is common?
Absolutely, yes, it is. I mean, in our sport, you know, Jay Wright, you know, at Villanova, stepped away. Roy Williams at North Carolina, Mike Krzyzewski at Duke. I mean, legendary coaches. Jim Boeheim at Syracuse, who, you know, did the Westwood One radio game when we were in Dayton playing Boise. I got a chance to spend some time with him and pick his brain. He's really happy right now. And he's glad he doesn't, you know, he's not in it. So, yeah, it absolutely, you know, whether it's, you know, Nick Saban on the football side or the guys I mentioned on the basketball side, it's I'm not saying it's the only reason, but it's a significant one from the people I've talked to.
And when you think about, I mean, given all the attention that this takes to manage and understand, what do you think gets lost as a result? Is it team cohesion? Is it motivation? Is it some other administrative headache you would have had to handle anyway?
That's a great question. I think this time of year, you know, what gets lost is vacation time, time with your family, time where you could be, you know, decompressing after the season. So that gets lost. But again, there's no reason to feel sorry for coaches. We signed up for this. I think once the season starts, you just got to go back to why you coach and what are you doing? What are you in this for? And I got into coaching to have I started as a high school coach. I got in this profession to help young men grow and develop basketball-wise, socially, be a role model, and have a positive impact on their life. That's why we did this, and we can't lose sight of that, and I haven't lost sight of that, and that's why I say I'm not going anywhere. I just hope we can put a team together that has enough talent to compete in the Big 12. But once the season starts next year, it's going to be business as usual for me. You know, one of the questions that came through is does NIL create problems and conflict amongst players? And at certain institutions it does, based upon how they handle it, how they structure it, which is open to every school. There's no blueprint. There's no best practices with this because it's the Wild West. So you try to stay true to your core values, which for us is trust, you know, character, work ethic, and valuing a college degree, and having a heck of a lot of fun, you know, coaching and playing the game of basketball at this level at a university like this. That's not going to change, but I hope we can put a team together that can be competitive, and we'll see if that happens or not.
It's a really interesting point that each college kind of has to make their own blueprint, right? Yes. How would you describe ours?
It's evolving. No, literally, I mean, we've talked about this, you know, my exec team and our coaches and our staff, that, you know, we've got to prepare for a variety of different scenarios that could play itself out over the next 18 months. You know, I got asked this question when I was in, I can't remember who asked me it, are you going to bring back baseball? And if we do that, we have to bring back, because we haven't even talked about Title IX and where this fits in all of this. But if you're going to bring baseball back, you got to bring softball. But with our industry today, with the challenges that we have with the lawsuits and what have you, and you know, a potential collective bargaining agreement, and there's something out there about 20% of your revenue goes to student athletes that's out there. There's 4 or 5 different scenarios that we're talking about, because the way the NCAA's model has worked historically for years, particularly in the FBS schools, football, men's and women's basketball drives all the revenue. That's where you get your ticket sales. That's where you get your multimedia rights. And those 3 sports have really funded all the other sports at all the other institutions. And of course, donor support that we get and all that. But that's reality. I mean, that's what's happened in our business. And the one thing, Jim, that I'll say, you made that comment about you don't know what your scholarship is. In our conference, and what we've had to do is when we sign a letter of intent and a financial aid agreement, there has to be a dollar amount in there for the 4 years. And so a student athlete knows what the minimum they're going to get. In her sport and TADS, you know, they're full scholarships in all those sports. So if they get a full scholarship, they're going to have it through their career. But you know, if you're an equivalency sport, you're going to get a percentage that you're going to get of your tuition and fees that'll be in that scholarship. But it's a 4-year commitment, and that can grow, but it can't go down.
Let me just say, is this on? Yeah. We certainly applaud Coach Prime and Rick's great ability to have him come in here. I would make a bold statement. He wouldn't be able to be doing the things that he's doing with the team right now before the transfer portal. That's where he's getting his players. You had to stay, at least not as fast. He's a great leader, motivational, beyond other things. But that transfer portal, and he's young. He doesn't remember the way Nick Saban had to keep people over at his house and give them, Sunday brunches or the other, coaches that even Tad mentioned. So that plus the NIL money, I need a quarterback. Where am I going to find one? Well, there's one down in that wants to transfer out of Florida because there's somebody in front of him in second year. Now we got $1 million in our collective. Again, Rick isn't approving it. Tad isn't approving the big center that he's going to, or point guard. I don't know what Tad needs next year. A number of people are transferring, so he needs some time off. He needs some time off. He's had a great season, great run. But, when you look at the issues about how fast you can turn a program around now, it's with these two things again. The younger coaches, that's the standard. They don't remember the old way. And so, it's the fan understanding this too, I think, so they know, who we're putting on the field and how the rest of the sports are handled. And I agree with Rick that, football, and men's basketball, or maybe women's basketball this year, are the only ones that have revenue positive, streams. And then it goes through to the rest of the players. Well, there's ways to deal with the other, non-revenue sports and Title IX, because we've got Title IX, which we don't have to get into, equal treatment between women and men, except for the, NCAA tournament 2 years ago when the women got 2 or 3 barbells. And anyway, we won't get into that.
We've only got about 10 minutes left, so I got maybe a closing thought from each of the panelists, and maybe a thought about whether or not, Coach, in 20, 30 years, you think we're going to look back and think that the intent, at least, of NIL was well-meaning and a success?
Absolutely. The intent was great. Rick talked about it. I mean, that's and I don't think there's any coach, administrator, student athlete, president, fan that doesn't agree with that. These kids should be able to profit from their name, image, and likeness, and that's what it was intended to do. It's morphed into where we are, and we don't like where we are. And again, we need some federal assistance because we have a national sport. We're competing across 50 different states in all the sports, and we need some rules. We need some guidelines. We need some equity. And not that you're going to have total equity, but you have to have some basis of reason, of what's reasonable for these young people to receive. And that's going to only happen through collective bargaining, in my opinion. And I don't know how long it's going to take us to get there, but to me, that's where this is headed. We need some help because at the federal level, because we have 50 different states with 50 different labor laws, and some are unions, some are not. And until we get that, and I know Charlie Baker, he spoke to our coaches association in Phoenix last week, and he's asking for a special exemption or a special class for collegiate athletics. And if we could somehow figure out how we could do that, that would be great for everybody. But I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon.
Closing thought is the intent, obviously, with NIL was good for certain people. Outside the university, as we said, they're not tied with the university. That doesn't address the arms race of coaches' salaries, of facilities, and just because Alabama pays its coach $8 million, now the next one gets $9 million, and it just becomes an arm's worth with coaches and that money needs to come. The university needs to recompense the student athlete or the athlete. Here I use student, there's ways to finance this, and we always use football and men's basketball. In fact, Tad turned this thing around. And then let me just say, I think that'll only be done through a collective bargaining agreement. And we call it a players association, so we don't have to use the word union. It's meaning are in words, and they don't call it generally the NFL union, it's the NFL Players Association. So but the reason is that they can split the monies that go to the owners, in this case the universities, and the players. And there has to be some correlation dollar-wise to that. And that's why there's salary caps and whatever. So we got to get on with what's worked in professional sports. This is a profession. This is professional. And I think, besides standardizing the portal, that's another thing. The state laws being, you're never going to get 50 state laws the same, and we know that. So I do think it's an exciting time if you are in the arena, but it's also a very dangerous time because there's going to be the haves and the have-nots. And it's now a question of which camp are you in?
Speaking of being in the arena, Kendall, we're so glad we had your voice on this panel. You're literally in the arena. A closing thought from you?
Yeah, I would just say I am very thankful for the opportunities that NIL has provided me with over my time here, and I think that is genuinely a very good thing for student athletes when it is done correctly. But I do, as I'm listening up here, think that it is kind of starting to get out of control. Even with my team, we obviously had a lot of people leave this year and are going to be having a lot of people coming in. And when you're talking about building a team culture and a team that you want to be on and play with, you do get the people that just want to go wherever the money is. And so it's harder, I think, now to really gauge whether or not you're getting people that want to buy into the culture and want to be a part of a winning program, or if they're just coming for the money or leaving for the money in that sense. And so overall, good thing, but rules.
And Rick?
I'm just trying to write down my thoughts. You got a couple hours. We can talk about it. Look, I think we're at I don't know if it's a moment in time, but this is an important time in college athletics. There is a significant threat to where intercollegiate athletics is going. That's a fact. We're seeing different lawsuits, and he mentioned one at over $4 billion, and there's others. There's a significant threat to our business. I do believe that student athletes, the way Kendall's doing it, should be able to monetize their name, image, and likeness. Had I had that opportunity, I wouldn't have made any money. We do need federal support. The transfers has to be considered in this, because if you look at one of the key values of intercollegiate athletics has been to provide meaningful education opportunities for student athletes. And we can't lose focus on that piece. And there has to be something that's tied to academics with these transfers. And I think the NCAA is talking about that. There has to be something, because if we go 4 years and a student athlete leaves that school and their eligibility is over and they don't have a degree that they can fall back on, we failed. And we got to remember that these are 18 and 22-year-old young men and women that aspire to be able to play out their trade, which in Kendall's case is women's basketball, and be able to get a meaningful education that sets them up for incredible community leaders in whatever community they go to. As it relates to coach's salary, I agree that some are too high, but let's take Coach Prime as an example. Look at the value that he's created for this community, for this institution. You look at our admissions applications, the growth in those, that didn't just happen. Deion Sanders came here, and you look at the diversity in those applications, and it's because of the exposure that he brings to this university. And so I think all of that is, you have to play into that as you look at the value of that coach. It's not just wins and losses, it's some of these other things that are happening in our community that I think are really positive for this community, and it's positive for the diversity in our student body. It's for our community and for our games and our all that. It's had a big impact. But have we made some mistakes? Yes, and I take responsibility just like the other 300 and some ADs that are Division I, because we let things happen, and we have to be stronger in our voices and getting the right people at the table, because this industry is incredibly valuable. It's provided in, I can't tell you how many meaningful opportunities, and you looked at doctors and politicians and lawyers and people that have gone on from here that have done amazing things. I mean, it's just incredible, and we can't lose sight of that. And I think we're losing sight of that, and that's a concern to me, because this industry allowed me to be successful in my life. It's going to allow her to be a doctor, and I'd love for her to operate on me at some point, because I have total confidence in her. But anyway, that's just kind of where I'm at. Is it's not a great day for intercollegiate athletics. We've got to get the right people at the table that are having meaningful discussions, that we can continue to provide these opportunity for great people like Kendall Wetta.
Big thank you to our panelists, everybody. Thank you so much. Enjoy the conference. That was great, man. Hey, great to meet you. That was incredible. Yeah, it was fun. Really fun. As am I. Yeah, Jim, that was great. Yes.
I know. Oh, Tad.
Hey, great to see you again, huh?